Welcome, everybody, to the November 2023 meeting of the Library Marketing Book Club. It's great to have you all here. And we have a wonderful guest today. So this month we read Content Marketing Strategy by Robert Rose. And we are fortunate, very fortunate to have Robert here to join us. So let me just tell you a little bit about Robert that you may or may not already know. Robert is a sought-after marketing coach, consultant, best-selling author, keynote speaker, and one of the world's most recognized experts in digital content strategy and marketing. Robert is the author of 4 best-selling books, so we have 3 more books to read in Robert's library.
No,
so
just read the one. You'll be
just
good.
the one. Okay. Oh, that's right. One of them. Some of them I hear you sometimes talk about is, yeah, maybe that one, not so much anymore. But Content Marketing Strategy, which is the one we read, Killing Marketing from 2017, Experiences, the 7th area of marketing, a Content Marketing Institute book from 2015, and Managing Content Marketing from 2011. For more than 12 years, Robert and his firm, The Content Advisory, have worked with more than 500 companies, including 15 of the Fortune 100. That is just awesome. He has provided strategic marketing advice and counsel for global brands such as Salesforce, Facebook, NASA, Hilton, CVS Health, McCormick Spices, Whirlpool, Microsoft, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And from listening to Robert on a podcast, wonderful podcast, This Old Marketing, which if you are not listening to it, you really should. It's a wonderful show that keeps you up to date on marketing, but you will well learn that Robert is a Dallas Cowboys fan. And
immediately everybody hates me. So there you go.
That's right. Everybody signs off. But Robert lives in Southern California, and Robert also has a history in screenwriting and playwriting and music. So Robert has actually created much of the music for the podcast and for other podcasts. And Robert, what I really love is you created the music for the ads that you're now do for HubSpot. So, so it's very cool.
Well, those, thank you. No, just a quick correction on that. Yeah, I pull that from a licensed source. So I pick it. I don't actually create it. Yeah.
But they are great. They are, if you wanted to hear really good, well-produced live read sounding ads, they are some of the best. So they're fantastic.
You're very kind.
So thank you so much, Robert, for joining us. And if you'd like to, just say hello and welcome to the group and a couple things, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is always fun. I mean, I have the funny thing is that as you pointed out, I didn't come to marketing from university. I walked out of university with an English literature degree, which basically means 2 things. I can talk about Anna Karenina, or I can talk about marketing, and marketing pays better, basically. So that's why I got into the business. Although there's some really interesting analogies in Anna Karenina with market, but that's a whole other thing. Anyway, so yeah, I've been doing this for quite a while and sunk my teeth into content in so many ways in the early 2000s as digital sort of reared its head, and really found that it was a way more interesting way to spend my time in business than, I always hated selling. Can't stand selling. And, it was like, well, you can create value with this fun content, inspiring, educational, entertaining content, which is kind of what I wanted to do anyway, as I was screenwriting and playing music and all those kinds of things. But now you can do it and actually get paid for it in a way that that furthers a marketing goal for a company. And I was like, that's what I want to do. So just figuring out and this is really maybe a way to kick off the conversation, is the thing that the reason, because the world did not need another book on content marketing, that's for sure. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about was there's this dichotomy that is out there where you've got all these things that we recognize, these companies that we recognize that are doing things that we would recognize as content marketing like things, operating like a media company, right? So you've got the Amazons of the world and the Legos of the world and Red Bulls of the world and all these companies, B2B and B2C, and in government and as well, nonprofits, doing things, but they wouldn't like if you went and asked them and said, "Hey, are you doing content marketing?" They'd go, "What the hell are you even talking about?" Right? They wouldn't know. They just know that it's smart business to go reach their customers where they are and deliver valuable things so that they can be establish some kind of relationship with them. But then there are the others that are sort of consciously doing it, right? Designing programs, going to the events, reading the books, doing the exercises, and sort of designing it. And I wanted to say, what do those two kinds of companies have in common, right? What are they doing consciously or unconsciously to create the activities, whether they're a big company, a small company, a solopreneur, a government organization, a nonprofit? What are those common activities that make up the ones that are succeeding at this? And so that was the whole nature of the thrust of the book anyway. And so hopefully I've been able to capture some of that based on all the different kinds of companies that we've worked with over the last 10 years. And really the birth of it was all about, sort of, I had come to answer those questions in my class, the class that I teach. And I was like, when 2023 coming out of COVID, it was like, we got to do something, right? And 2022, I was like, I finally got it. Like, I finally felt like the class was done. It was like the sculptor, right? It's done. It's finally done. And so I said, I want to codify this. I want to codify all of that into something. Yeah. And then that's when Kogan Page came and said, "Hey, do you have a book in you about content marketing?" I'm like, "Well, funny you should ask." And then interestingly, I had to warn them, and I warn everybody about this. I'm like, but it's not like, this isn't it's not Malcolm Gladwell, right? I mean, this is not exciting, interesting stuff. This is like geeky, process oriented charters, teams, workflow. It's all that kind of stuff. So I think it's going to appeal to a very specific audience, but that's the whole story behind it.
Oh, that's great, Robert. It really, I mean, and I know what you're saying. I know what you mean, like when you read about it. And there's a segment on there on governance, and the word governance sounds really boring, but it's super important. Like it's, there was even, so I've got a lot of notes. I'm going through the different one. I'm trying to see if I have the one where you were talking about governance. But it's important concepts, and I think there are some really great things in the book that definitely connect to how, you talk in the book about how there, like you said, there's companies that do content marketing and maybe don't even realize that's what they're doing because it's what they do. But then there's others who kind of look at content marketing and sort of know what it is and say, well, okay, so we're creating content, so we're doing it right. And it's not necessarily it's maybe a start, it's maybe an intro, but there's a next step to that. There's more. That's what this book really provides, is kind of a lot more framework around how to make that more efficient and more effective. So that's kind of what I was reading into it.
Yeah. I mean, as you look for that question, I'll add this. It's funny because there's been pushback on that idea. Right. And so, as we've gone through the last few years, this, and it's so funny that we're talking about this. I literally just got an RFP for a new client today. And the client basically said in the RFP, like the opening, like, don't talk to us about, they want a content marketing strategy, but they were like, but don't talk to us at this whole brand as publisher thing. Don't come at us with that because, likes and engagement and traffic and all that. We're like, we're done with that. Like they're really sort of like turned off by that whole brand as publisher thing. But if you read what they then sort of rant on in their RFP intro, what they're really ranting on is this idea of the content marketing concept that has been so twisted to how we market ourselves like a movie company, or how we market ourselves like, a publisher, or how we, market ourselves like we're, so cool and we're trying to create cool things. And what they were saying was, no, we want to get into the we want to get into valuable, data-driven, measurable content. And what they're really saying is, we don't know how to operate, like a media company. We don't know how to create the activities that are needed in order to scale this thing and work. And what they're complaining against is sort of the, hey, if we just create cool stuff, it'll all work out, right? And so, but that's not how it works out. Of course, we have to build in the habits that we do every day in order for value to be created.
Yeah, and that definitely is clear in the book. I mean, there is, there's a lot about the quality and quantity and the measurement process, which I think, is something very valuable. And a question that I think a lot of us, we talk about in the marketing world is, how do we measure the value of what the content is? How can we understand, we get these questions from, if we're trying to do content marketing, and trying to operate in a way where we are creating things to engage and or bring in organic search, bring in people from organic search, and we're not really setting up, something else that you and I talked about, that you may not remember, but when I first talked to you about it was about the organization of a library, and you had pointed out in an article in June about how the libraries are organized, and libraries are organized so that people who know what they're looking for can come find those things. Whereas that's not an effective way to organize your content or organize the things that you do, because it's not the same process that people are going through. So, you really need to look at and this really resonated with me in terms of libraries, and how when you're working with other people, working with people that are used to library organization systems, how it can be difficult to get them to see anything other than, well, we have to put it all on our website in a very way like the stacks, like here's the things that you would be looking for, and we have to try to organize things into that, instead of looking at where you are thinking about what kind of problems are people having, what are they going to solve. And then it kind of goes into, a little further part of the book where you talk about the jobs to be done. So what kind of jobs are there to be done? Is that what the jobs to be done? Am I understanding that correctly? Is that where that is?
Yeah, I think I would take a step back, and I would say, so part of my, and I think one of the, for whatever strengths I have in bringing the thinking to the clients and people that we work with, is that I come to this with not just a marketing or sort of sort of a persuasive sort of whatever marketing communications, PR, sort of that sort of angle to it, but also with the true definition of content strategy as well, where librarians in very large part, and library services play an incredibly important role, right? The assembly of taxonomies and folksonomies and organization of content by category, all of the things that we think of as providing an organized way to organize information is incredibly important. But that's an incredibly important thing because it's a foundation upon which we layer the idea of guiding people to a particular point of view. And that's where the marketing thing comes in, right? Where when we think about marketing, right? And I often will use the Netflix example, because so if you think about Netflix, how do they organize all of the millions of pieces of content that they have? I'm sure there is, and there have been many articles written about it, about the metadata and the way that it's organized and the way that they have their asset management system. So, I mean, it's an incredibly organized library. Yeah. However, when they present that to the world, it's not about that, right? It's about, how do I quickly tell you what you want to hear? Or how do I quickly tell you that you need to be doing this? Yeah. And so the difference with that in a company right? When we start thinking about a company like a Cisco or Amazon or, or any company that is offering up a very specific set of products and services, the goal isn't to say, here's a bunch of stuff and you go figure out what it is you need or want. It's like, no. You need to know this, and this is what we want you to know. And hopefully you really need to understand it because you have a problem or you have a want that you're trying to satisfy. And we're going to help guide you through coming to the right answer on that. So it's a different way of organizing the presentation of all of your content but unfortunately, we sort of take that inside looking out perspective. So many companies, and Cisco's a great example of this. And I actually, in the presentation that I do on that topic, I actually use them as an example. If you go to their website and there's a big old link that says resource center, it might as well just say library, right? And right. So it says resource center. And if you go in, it's like, well, here's, you can search by all of our white papers. You can search by all of our ebooks. You can search by all of our podcasts. That's useless to me as a searcher or as a visitor to your resource center, because you're not helping me understand how I get faster to my need or want. So while it's great internal organization, and we should and have that, it's a lazy way of saying, well, all we need to do is take our internal taxonomy and categorizations and just make that front facing. Yeah. And then hopefully people will find what it is they need.
Yeah, very much. And if I can put Angela on the spot for a second, Angela just recently had a blog or a video where she talked about let's get rid of the word resource, right? Angela, was that was the first one, right?
Call it the thing that it is. So that's like a little pet peeve of mine with a lot of libraries. They'll do that too. They'll have like, here's a list of resources, and I'm like, what is the problem that the resource is solving? So organize that. We even did that at my company, to be honest with you. I love this conversation in particular because a lot of this is actually applying to my job at Novelist. We had this whole conversation and reorganized our websites based on not the features that our products have, but the problems that they're solving for our customers. And I think that would be an easy way for libraries to make this transition to something that's less metadata and is more engaging for their audiences that show up on their website. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So no, I mean, and that's the thing. Yeah. And like I said, I mean, but coming from outside the library world and not having that as the experience sometimes makes it difficult to communicate. And that was to get back to the governance question. That was the thing, like Robert, you started talking out about, and then I'm sorry, I'll let anybody else who wants to talk about the book. It's not just me here, but you talked about, Robert, like not being into sales, and like, sales was not really the thing that, was where you were. And when you're talking about the content marketing operating model, you talk about sales and marketing teams and how they don't communicate very well, or, that could happen. So your marketing team can be great at creating.
Let's just say it, Chris. They don't communicate very well.
They don't communicate well.
You don't have to soft pedal that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And, here, I mean, I guess it is kind of like the public service would be our people that are out there doing the selling, as it were. And then, if we're creating marketing content, and and like you're talking about how, we create something, and then maybe we, if we're not getting that information out to them so they understand what things are, and not having a relationship with them and not working on building that relationship with them, and not having that governance process, which is what you're talking about in that particular section of the book, then it does make it very difficult. They feel frustrated answering questions about things that we have not worked with them to understand. And so does that talk about how you get into the governance process?
Yeah, it comes down to, I mean, it gets, you start getting into fancy words and fancy things and, talking about all sorts of complexities, and it ends up being a bit of a word salad. But at the end of the day, when we think about what's really, like when we peel it all back, what's the real problem, right? And the real problem is that content And specifically the creation ideation process, right? The creation of the things that we want to say as a business or as an institution basically is treated in the business as a vending machine, and on, sort of, here are all the things that we want to say, says sales, CEO, demand generation teams, all these different teams. I want to say this, I want to say that, I want to say this. And we feed those demands into the content team, who then have to supply words and pictures and assets to meet the demand of those things. And it should be exactly the other way around. It should be exactly the other way around, which is the content team figures out what it is, all the things that we want to say. And then in consultation with sales and demand generation, et cetera, figure out all the containers, whether those are ebooks or white papers or podcasts or web pages or whatever they are, that those stories should be filled in, right? And it's literally just as simple as, I can't tell you how many businesses, small and large, where there's a content person or a content team, and I say, tell me about your create, like, how do you decide what's going to get made? And they say, oh, well, we have a form on our website, on our intranet, right? Where the people can go in and they can ask for a piece of content. And they're really proud of it, right? Because it'll say on the form, it'll say, you have to tell me the persona that it's for. You have to tell me what you want. It's it's a list, white paper, ebook, web page, email, blog post, whatever. You have to tell me that. You have to tell me what the main value points you are, and they're really proud because that creative brief that is getting created is what's going to feed them or their agency or whoever the freelancer they're going to use to fulfill on that thing. So the first thing we've done is defined a container, right? So we define this container and then we go, okay, great. Now, how are we going to fill it full of content? And so you see all these wonderfully big, huge, wonderful ideas get poured into really small containers, like an email or an ebook. But then the reverse, which is sadly more often true, you see really small ideas get put into like these big containers, like a white paper or a research document or something like that. Yeah. And the only reason that we do that is because there's a deadline associated with it and we have to get it out the door. And so that's it. That's not a strategy, right? That's literally just making widgets, and we're just figuring out which widgets we can get out the door the fastest. And then somebody goes, we really don't have a focused voice out there. We don't really have we've got a really stratified voice, and we look siloed. It's like, duh, right? Why do you think that's true? You're putting the exact cart before your horse.
Yeah. It's definitely, and I mean, it's so familiar. It's too familiar. We did have something that was more of a shopping list. We have tried to revise that into more of a, just tell us more about what it is that you're trying to say and who you're trying to say it to and who you're trying to get.
It's like the Kramer from Seinfeld thing, right? It's like, why don't you just tell me the name of the movie you'd like to see? Right?
That's right. That's how we definitely have, it's very common way to approach it. So there's a couple things in the chat here I just want to call it. So Angela says, helps to think, when we were talking about library staff, it helps to think of the staff, and this is in the book too, outside of the marketing department as another audience to whom you have to market. So it's not just about thinking about what is the what is the audience, right? But and this is also in there too, is about how do we talk to those internal audiences, and how do we connect with them? So Robert,
I mean, as I've said many times, that your tweetable moment, if you will, is that 90% of a great content strategy has nothing to do with the content. It is all about internal communications and collaboration, right? That is, which gets to Leslie's point as well, right? Having someone tell me what to say, right, is like having that internal collaboration hopefully can get you to that, a much cleaner ideation process where you're not just getting an order for something and saying, then figure out what it's going to be and tell me later, right? Yeah. It's like this, how do we actually start to, as I often say, the job of the content team is not to be good at content. It's to make the business or the institution good at content. And so in many ways, it has nothing to do with the words or the pictures we put together. It has everything to do with how do we collaborate together to come out with what we want to say? What does the business want to say?
Yeah. And so Robert and Leslie, is there something a little bit about that one that you would like to say a little bit more about, or what's your process now, and what kind of things, might you be looking for?
It's kind of a can of worms, Chris, because I find myself all the time, those silos are so real. And so, like me having to reach out to another department and say, what resources are lagging? Like, what is it that you want us to push right now? And then I find out the name of, a specific database or something. And then I have to go to that company's website. And sometimes I have to hunt and peck forever to get, a blurb, or I'm like stealing a logo from somewhere because they don't make it easy to, it's refreshing when an organization makes it easy by having a press kit or a media packet somewhere on their site, and they write the blurbs for you, or they give you pieces where you can insert your own logo. But that's so rare. It's so rare. And so I'm cracking up when Robert's calling, a content team, because I am a team of one. I know you are too, Chris.
It often is that way. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I'm lucky to have a few, but yeah.
So there's so much time that gets wasted trying to gather and find and research. And what Angela was saying in her comment about, of course, the people feeding us information are not marketers. So they've written, a 6-paragraph summary of their program or event or resource that we then need to distill into something marketable. And, the amount of time that takes is sometimes a deal breaker for being able to get the message out at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and by the way, this isn't an uncommon thing to happen internally with companies too, right? This isn't, we see this all the time in technology companies, especially technology companies where it's highly engineering driven, where marketers or content team of 1 or 2 or of 10 are getting, basically the engineering documents from the engineering group and saying,
yes,
go make wonderfulness with that, right? And so you go, yes. but so often what we find is that is, the funny thing is that it gets to this challenge of the create stage, so if you can even Google this, right? So it's like, tell me about content creation workflow and give me, you just have Google show you all the images, right? And what it'll have is usually a 4-step process, right? Create, edit, produce, distribute, right? Or some form of those 4 steps. Sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 6, etc. But the problem is that create is not a workflow state. Create is a process in and of itself.
Yeah.
And it needs its own process, right? Because if I ask, and so often I'll ask a CEO, I'll say, tell me about your content creation process. And they kind of look at me like my dog looks at me when, I'm like, tell me about how does it work? Like, tell me how your content creation process. And he goes, I don't know. I just have ideas and I send it to my team. And somehow magically, I have no idea how that happens. Stuff comes out the other side. And I'm like, oh, do you have agencies? I don't know. Maybe. Do you have freelancers? Maybe. How do they figure out how to speak about it in the right way? I don't know. Right. Sometimes they'll email me and they'll ask me questions. Sometimes they don't. So there's no process. And without any process, you can't expect things to scale. In other words, and you can't expect to be able to predict the right amount of time that it's going to take. So it's literally sitting down and saying, we have to come up with a process for the create idea. First of all, how do ideas get generated? Then from those ideas, how do we create the outlines or the abstracts or the stories that we want to tell? Then from there, we can say, great, what are the containers that we want to tell? And then that's when it moves into the intake, like, okay, now we can start writing or researching or, doing the producing of content that we have to do.
Wow. I mean, this is, it it makes so much sense, but it's going to take me a minute to wrap my head around it, because like so if I understand you correctly, you're saying you have the idea for the content, like it's something that you want to make first, and then you're finding what information is going to fit with that venue. Like, am I understanding you correctly? Okay.
Yeah, there's two pieces to that, right? Okay. One is how do ideas get generated into things that need to get done, right? Content that needs to get created, right? Yeah. To your very appropriate point, sometimes we don't get a say in that, right? Sometimes it's somebody handing us a bunch of stuff and saying, go make good out of that, right? Make wonderful flowers out of that. Mm-hmm. We don't know what it is, right? Mm-hmm. Or we say, I've got a great idea for this thing. And we go to the person or the team or whoever it is to say, we want to tell this story. And they go, I don't know, I got some stuff for you, maybe, So however that ideation process happens, that's step one, right? It's basically saying there's ideas being floated that need to be pulled into sort of the, what it formed, the clay needs to get formed in terms of what it is we're going to do. That's step one of the create process. Then two is we need to actually take those things and go, great, what is it? What is the story? What are we do? What are we lacking? What do we need? What's the research that needs to get done? What's, where is the core story in all these ideas? Where, in other words, making the clay start to take some kind of shape, whether it's going to be a pot or whether it's going to be a bird or whether it's, whatever it's going to be, just shaping literally the raw content. Out of that then comes needs, right? Okay, well, we're going to have to go interview somebody. We're going to have to get blurbs from this. We're going to have to get product shots. We're going to have to get logos. We're going to have, all those raw elements need to be assembled into a portfolio, if you will, or a bucket, whatever it is, of stuff that we can use to then produce all this content. Now, you'll notice what we haven't talked about yet is whether it's going to be a web page or whether it's going to be a book or whether it's going to be a blog post or whether it's going to be all of those things. And so the next step is to say, what is it that we want to create? Because it'll affect the list, the sort of bill of materials, if we will, of all the things that we need to go collect. We're going to make a podcast out of this. Oh, great. We're going to need to make sure to get an interview with that person to make sure that we've got the audio to be able to do that podcast, all those kinds of things. Now, get to the final step, which is what's the priority on this? Like once we figure all this out, when does all this need to get done? Let's map it out into a calendar or map it out into sort of all the things that are going to get created. And in the perfect world, we're creating stuff that we won't need for months. And we're creating stuff that we're going to need, next week. And we're creating stuff, so it becomes sort of this bucket of raw materials that we can turn into so many things. The first pushback you're going to get by saying, hey, I want to put this creation process in place to everybody, right? Senior leadership, your colleagues, whatever. The first pushback is, wow, that sounds like you're really going to slow things down at the front part of the whole process. And you're like, yep, I'm going to slow things way down at the front end of the process, because guess what? It's going to exponentially speed up the back end of the process.
Right, because how often are we solving the wrong problem?
Right, that's exactly right.
This happens on a daily basis here, where I feel like I have to interrupt somebody's workflow and be like, is that really the problem we're trying to solve here? And we're already 3 steps in on the creation process, only to find out we've answered the wrong question.
Right, exactly. Right. Or worse, you get to the part where it gets to the designers and the people who open up InDesign and Photoshop and all those kinds of things. And they go, we can't complete this because we don't have this. And you're like, all right, so I got to go back to the originator of the ideas and go, hey, do you have a logo? Do you have a picture? Do you have it's in the wrong aspect ratio. It's in the wrong, it's wrong format. You're constantly iterating on raw pieces of content that you don't have, because everybody decided it was going to be a brochure first, right? Everybody decided it was going to be a billboard first. And it's like, Yeah, but nobody thought to get high-res images, or nobody thought to get the high-res version of the logo. And so we're constantly in this iteration stage, when it should be, as soon as it gets to production and design, that should be like, they should have everything they need to like produce all the things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very, that's great. Oh, thank you. Yeah, Leslie, I hope that helps.
That's fun.
Helps us. It helps everybody.
It helps to know that this is not just me.
It's so many businesses. It's the number one problem. This is the number one thing that we work on with clients. It's the number one thing is exactly that. It's ultimately, and this is kind of the point of the book, is that that's all an operation, right? That's all operational strategy. It's all basically saying, honestly, it's saying, let's make content a thing. Like, let's not just assume it's this magic black box that stuff goes into and stuff comes out of. Let's actually make it a business strategy. Let's make it something we pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear more detail for us, since we're all in the library field, about what kind of content you think is a great fit for us as libraries, because we've seen a lot of success by some libraries doing the funny TikTok videos or memes and things like that, and I think that is really successful for building communities and getting people to break through those stereotypes of stuffy libraries and things like that. But in terms of value add for our library patrons, trying to solve those problems for them, what do you think is a great fit content-wise? Is it blog posts that point people towards, resources, hidden gems they might not know about? Is it videos explaining how to use certain things? It's probably all of the above, but what do you think?
Well, you're going to get some of my personal take on libraries, right? So as part of this, right? So take that with a giant grain of salt, because I am not an expert in libraries, but I have an opinion on them, right? So when I think about so Theodore Levitt said, understanding what business you're really in, right? That was the, and the classic one of this is that the railroads didn't understand that they were in the transportation business, not the railroad business. The buggy whip is often, thrown out there. He actually, in his paper that he wrote about this, was talking about the entertainment business versus the movie studio business, right? Because it was the early 60s, and basically movie studios were going under. They were being acquired by oil companies. This is when Gulf Oil bought Paramount, the whole thing. And it's basically the end of the movie mogul studios. And as he was taking them to task, he basically said, what these movie companies didn't understand is that with the growth of television, the growth of radio, the growth of, live performances, that these companies didn't understand they were in the entertainment business, not in the, not in the movie business. And a similar thing is, I think, happened with libraries, right? Where in so many ways, a lot of libraries believe that their business is in the book loaning business, right? They are basically there to provide access to books to patrons. And in so many ways, as I don't need to educate any of you on, the entirety of libraries and the sort of strategic function of libraries has fundamentally changed, right? And so what is that? And I think it differs for different municipalities, different locales, different libraries. I think it's definitely different, but it's in some form access to knowledge, right? Access to, the ability for us to become better human beings, right? And so we could wordsmith that, mission statement it all day, whatever those things are, I think really important. The reason I mention all of that, because I think that has in large part to do with the tension between what kind of content will work versus where, what the mission or what the expanded idea of a library's business model really is all about. Value model, maybe better than business model, really is all about. And so one of the things that I see really working there is the interactivity, providing providing access to things like, space for, people to perform, incubators for internet access, all of those kinds of things. And so when I start thinking about how do I express that as modern content, it's not more TikTok videos, and it's not more social media posts, and it's not more promotional content. It's how do I provide more access to knowledge that the patrons of my city or whatever the coverage area is can utilize, right? And what should those things be, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're, whether it's small businesses or whether it's, whatever's driving those local needs, so figuring out what my audience is, and speak about this at some length in the book, figuring out what my audience's jobs to be done as it pertains to access to knowledge, figuring that out, and then providing that. And really then it's just a question of what channels am I using to provide that level of content. And it's probably going to be all of the classics, everything from local TV to local print to physical events. One thing I find libraries really sort of not availing themselves of as much is physical events. Physical events are so key these days. Businesses, I will tell you, are doubling down in 24 on physical events because of the obvious, but also because they are proving to be, as social media becomes more and more ineffective, let's just say that. I mean, social media is truly just becoming media. Though there's a widening gap now between those who actually create content. That includes all of us, right? Doing links, putting up content. Just fewer of us are doing fewer of it, right? We're just not providing as much content. That doesn't mean our usage of social media is down, but it's the TikTok effect, right? Mm-hmm. We're not creating content. We're just consuming it for entertainment or for news or whatever we're getting. But the social part of media is really becoming more expressed in physical events, physical and digital events in many ways, but physical events most specifically, where the experience and the ability to share my experience and create those moments, those experiential moments for our audiences are so important. So my take would be really thinking hard and doubling down on events is the real key there.
Okay. Thanks.
And using events, both digital and physical, to connect your audience together, right? Not just as one-off sort of stunts or one-off campaigns, but rather regular events that start to build loyalty and trust with that audience so that they want to come back, and every time you do more and more and more.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Other comments from the group? Other questions from the group? I certainly have more, but I'll pause for a moment like a teacher and wait and see if somebody fills the space.
I was wondering if I could have some ideas and feedback on where you would start when you're just getting to know where your audience is at as far as their level of information that they have. Where do we start them so that we can meet them where they're at and help them move farther, and closer to us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you mean like where to start in understanding that, or where to start once you do understand that?
So let's say I'm creating, we're going to do the creative content process and we're going to start building our schedules. Do I start at where do I know where to start my information? Like, how much does my audience already know versus how can I, where do I need to start in the education of
somebody
that?
Wants your attention in the worst way. What am I doing? Mom, what am I doing? It all starts in, so there's a gap analysis to be done, right? Which is to say, here's what we know. Here's what we know about our current, and much of this depends mostly on what it is you're trying to improve, sort of functionally, right? And let me explain what I mean by that. From a business sense is, when I think about what are we trying to do? Are we trying to widen out the top of our awareness funnel, right? Are we trying to, is that the real problem that we're trying to solve for, right? Is making more people aware so that we can pour more people into the top of our, which I know is a challenge for libraries for sure. It's a number one challenge, right? But it may also be like, how do we get more people to come back? Like if they come, we're having a real problem, we solve one thing for them, but we don't solve multiple things for them, right? So they come in and they do the thing that they want to do, and it's nice. And then maybe they come in once a quarter or they come in once a month. But what we really want is for them to come back weekly, right? We really want to increase the participation that they have in either the single thing that they do or the multiple things that we have to offer. In other words, it's educating them into and persuading them into do more stuff with us. So those are two ends of a spectrum, right? And there's everything in between. So just to save the time, we don't need to cover it, but you get the idea, right? Because it's a very similar business and marketing funnel, right? It's awareness, interest, desire, ultimately transaction of some kind, and then hopefully back around to transaction again. And so that's the first thing to answer is, where are we trying to solve for first? Because we can't solve for all of it in one go. But once we have that answer, then it's like, great, now I need to understand where we are with that audience and where their gaps are with what it is they need. Do we really understand? Let's just use the top of the journey to as an example, as an awareness. Yeah, we're getting this small percentage of people, and they're pretty loyal, and we've reached them pretty frequently, and we know how to get a hold of them, et cetera. They are our bullseye sort of audience, right? They love libraries, they bring their kids. But there's a secondary persona or a tertiary persona, or building out your bullseye, as it were, of people that would spread out the awareness. What do they want? What is their job to be done? Like, what is their ultimate desire or missing link or whatever? Is it something that we don't offer? Or is it something that we do offer that they don't know about? Or is it something where we're not targeting the right channels in order to reach those people? And so the best way to do that is to know them, right? And, I talk in the book about a process to actually do the persona level research, but basically it's getting out into the community and understanding who they are as people and how they operate in whatever that job is, whatever that need or want is, and understanding how they currently or don't currently, right? There's always like solving the job that's not done, right? In other words, they just don't know what they don't know. And so it's finding what those things are and then starting to say, look for where the biggest opportunities are, because that'll start to help you prioritize. Okay, now here's the kind of content we want to focus on for this part of their journey, to this very specific audience that has a very specific need. Now we've got a priority for the next month, the next quarter, the next campaign, the next initiative that we want to run, because that'll help us expand our audience. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thanks, Tanner. Yeah. Robert, yeah. And you mentioned in the book, there definitely is the part on, definitely, like, you don't know, a part on audience persona. And am I correct in there's a tool on the content marketing strategy website for persona, or is that something that's linked through the book? I thought there was one thing in there that's linked.
There's a more detailed process document for it, right? So basically what I do is I end up, and this gets really to the heart of the question, is I think there is a distinct difference between what I call an audience persona versus a buyer persona, right?
Yes.
And buyer persona is that who identifies as having the need or want. And the audience persona is somebody we want to reach for whatever business reason that we may have, whatever marketing reason we may have, but we don't understand what it is that they need or want, or we need them to understand that what we have is what they need or want. And so it's a much broader set of people, right? Yeah. Because buying journey is a moment in time. Yeah. Our audience is way broad, right? And this is especially true in libraries. Our audience is basically everybody that can come to our library. Yep. And so the key is that we do already have some people who have an immediate need. They've got a time-based need for whatever it is. They got to check out a book. They have a project that they're going to get done, whatever it is. They're in the buying mode. But what are they doing else time, right? What are they doing in the other 90% of their day or the 90% of their week? How can we know them so that we can start satisfying some of those knowledge needs as well? And that's the difference between developing an audience persona and what would be classically called a customer or buyer persona.
That's great. Yeah. And really helpful. I look forward to actually going through that document and seeing what that is. And well, Robert, we just have a couple minutes left here. I mean, is there anything, where can people follow you? What would be good ways to people, and what kind of things do you have that would be, that you'd like to share and you'd like people to understand and check out?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for talking about the book. I'm super excited about it, and happy for its existence. Look, as you can tell, hopefully you can tell, I love talking about this stuff. This is my jam. So I love just like geeking out on this stuff and trying to figure it out. Social media, LinkedIn.
Yep.
I've given up on the man child, so I'm done with Twitter. Deleted my account. I'm out. Drop the mic. I'm out. Threads. I'm on Threads. Robert Rose on Threads. LinkedIn. Love to connect with you on LinkedIn and talk more, discuss more, all those things. The website that you were kind enough to mention is the website for the book, which is contentmarketingstrategy.com, which has, as you noted, some extra stuff that couldn't fit into the book or just didn't feel right to put into the book, more visual, more video, a little more in-depth stuff. And then the consulting website where I sort of live and sell my wares is contentadvisory.net. The dad genes of domains, basically.
That's awesome, Robert. Well, thank you. And before you go, if you can't, let's see, I gotta count for a second. So am I 1, 2, 3, 6, 8, 10? Okay, can you so if you can pick a number between 1 and 10, we'll select somebody for next month's book.
Okay.
So choose a number between.
Well, I would go with my favorite number, which is 7.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Genevieve or Genevieve. I don't know how you say your name, Genevieve or Genevieve, but because we do have many Canadian friends join us here. So, but nice. You will win a copy of next month's book, and the book we're reading next month is Grit by Angela Duckworth. So, I'm very excited to read that book. It should be a good one to read together. It's definitely one of those ones that's a little outside of marketing, but definitely has some really cool applications. Robert, do you have a book that you would suggest for this group? Is there anything that comes to mind that you can think that would be good for this group?
Put me on the spot. Why not?
Or or a place.
I am there's so many business books that I would recommend.
Yeah.
Basically, I'll put it this way.
Yeah.
Anything there's an author, her name is Rita Gunter McGrath.
Okay.
Anything by her, but especially there's a book called The End of Competitive Advantage.
Okay.
Which I think gets to the whole discussion we had about libraries and the jobs to be done and all those kinds of things. The End of Competitive Advantage is a fantastic, maybe the best business book I read in the last decade. It's just it's a very strategy oriented book. That's a great one. I'm reading right now, Ray Dalio's book, and I'm blanking on that. Hold on just 2 seconds. It's Principles by Ray Dalio. I know he can be a little controversial in terms of who he is, but I'm finding the book very, very inspiring.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I know. I hear the folks from Marketing Brew talk about Dalio. So very good. Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you again, Robert, so much for taking the time to join us. This was so wonderful.
Absolutely.
And hopefully the folks that didn't join us will get an opportunity to see this, but because we will share this with everybody who is on our list. But thank you, Robert. I hope you have a wonderful holidays. I look forward to hearing you on the marketing, on This Old Marketing, and catching up with you and following you on LinkedIn. And thanks so much, everybody, for coming. It was wonderful to have you all here, and we'll see y'all again soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, everybody. Really,
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Chris. Bye.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Robert.
Hi, Angela.
Talk to you soon.
Bye. Hi, Leslie. Bye, Leslie.
Yay. Bye-bye, everybody. Good to see you.
So good to see you guys.
Yes. Thanks, Leslie. Great questions. Thank you for taking the time. It was awesome.
I love it. See you next time.
See you next time. Bye.
Okay, bye.